What is self is the first question. Is it your mind? Is it your body? Is it your thoughts? That's a self inquiry, basically trying to explore. The first topic is who are you, or what is self? Because we're talking about self mastery. What is the self? Is it, when I say, who am I, or what is, if I point to myself and say, what is self here? Then one has to explore, how are you identifying the self? Are you identifying based on name, your profession, who you are, your position in a career, or position in the family? What is your state, relationships, things like that? Is there something more? So I think one is to explore that first. So once you establish something like that there is something more than what you are identifying, because all these identifications, again, is all given to us. We are not exploring who we actually are. So I think that is the first thing. The second thing is, once we've known somewhat that there is something more, we still obviously don't know, and haven't gotten to the real self. Then the next question is, what are our like obstacles, or what are our blocks to knowing our real self? So things like, for example, we have some of these false identification about what has happened to you in life, how people have treated you, or circumstances in life. And so that sometimes makes the person think that, like, how people will say, I am who I am because of the sum of my experiences. While it's true, but is that true also to go to the real self? Part of it is, these are the obstacles, because we think that makes you who you are, but again, you're identifying it with circumstances and situations and experiences and all of that. So I think that's the second thing. And then the third thing would be, how do we, once we've figured that out, then how do we overcome that and go to the real self? And that is where the responsibility part of it comes, where it is 100% responsibility of how you can stay, in that steadiness which you've created. Always anchor yourself in that steadiness, and then, function a little bit better. Of course, then you have, we talk about tools, about how we can do little things to realize that. I think the last one would be to understand why we, for example, we talk about healing, which means whatever we are going through, whether it's physical, emotional, energetic, it doesn't matter. Why are we stuck there? And because we think that certain things which have happened to our life are not supposed to be happening. And it's like good things happening to bad people, or the bad things happening to good people. And you think there is a certain way of how reasonable life should be. And so based on that, you function. And a lot of times when things don't happen the way it should be happening, according to my yardsticks or that person's yardsticks, then it's a mess. And so it starts with a lot of these suppositions as to what it should be like. And if it doesn't work like this, then my life is not great. So some of these myths have to be broken and realize, with certain acceptance of the fact that it's not happening to only you. First of all, I'm not the center of attention in the whole world. It's a sum of everybody's collective issues. We may not be able to understand that because it's not something you can understand with the rational human mind. It's beyond that. But if we learn to accept that, then what happens is we're able to stay in that real self and master our steadiness and stay in that, not to overcome, to deal with whatever happens in life more effectively, and stay in the love, or stay in that peace, or stay in the calmness, which is kind of very important for us, to deal with life, in the life journey, much better, because also we can realize our own follies. So to be more aware of how I'm thinking, what bothers me, what hurts me, why am I sensitive, why am I taking everything personally? Does it have to be personal? Is it personal at all? And what are my insecurities which make me look at things like that? So I think the self-awareness part of it is huge, where we're able to at least see different facets of our mind, which play a huge part in how we function. So that in itself is amazingly beneficial, to show us how we can become our own masters at that point, when we can use these experiences as to grow from it, rather than live in that wound and try to make that a big deal, and make like use it for a secondary gain, which we're not even aware of, because people do that, and then become almost like, and that comes from the fact that, wait, this shouldn't have happened to me, and because it has happened to me, I am the one who has gone through more, so I deserve more love, or I deserve more affection, or I get out, or for example, I have suffered more, so I need more love, or I deserve more love, not need, I deserve more love. I'm entitled to much more than the next person, because of my life circumstances. So these are the things which pull you down. That's what I'm trying to say. It's the saboteurs, or whatever you call them, which are obstacles in you, which doesn't allow you to move forward, looking deeper inside. And these are all created, belief systems are created because of your circumstances and situations, and those belief systems become strong, and you live in it, and you believe that that is how life should be. But so all these false layers you created, you want to get beyond it and go in and look at it. The more you look at it, you realize the futility of it, because it kind of binds you. You're not free anymore. So eventually the idea is to be free from all this, which is what leads to self-mastery. So there is a sense of freedom we want to get at. And I think that's what is self-mastery. And if one can get to some point of the self-mastery, then it's amazing, because then the next you will go through a personal transformation. And what does it look like? We can call it whole, not fragmented, because you're one being, all in one piece, because you're not depending on your mind to dictate how your life goes. Don't have to get people's approval, appreciation, acknowledgement to feel good about yourself, things like that. The first discovery is the mind is not the self. So because we live in the mind, that is the first discovery. So I think that's clear, because if we don't even know that we are actually not the mind, because everything is identified by the mind, like we identify ourselves through the mind. And while we need the mind, I'm not saying we don't, but it's like false identities, all of these things we've created. So if we can get to a point of that is the self-discovery, then we can try and stay in that state of the self, which is free and which is not bound by the mind, or which is telling you stories about everything, about memories, about desires, about thought forms from the past and everything. So you're able, if you're more aware, so it gives you a state, if first the discovery of the self, and staying in that state allows you to be more aware of your structure and function of your thought forms or your mind. So the first thing is your mind, because again, the body follows the mind. The body is doing its job to 100%. But why we get physical diseases is because the mind doesn't function appropriately, and the body is so closely connected to the mind, neurophysiologically, hormonally, all the chemical substances which are released, all of them. So that's why we have to go to the mind, which is the root of all the miseries or illnesses or all that kind of stuff. So when we look at our mind, we have to really be looking at it without any judgment, without any getting into the thought forms, thought loops, or anything like that. the more we are able to look at our minds, how it actually functions, which means that, certain things, certain people may trigger you in a certain way. So you're just looking at who the trigger is, how your mind is triggered, and what is it, how does it behave. So when you look at that, then you realize that you have these triggers, and then you can explore where the problem root is. For example, if you had, in the past, then some kind of a subconscious belief system you've developed, and if that is kind of disturbed or rocked by somebody who comes from the outside, then you are reacting a certain way. So this is all your mind function, which is the cause of these suffering, internally, whether it's a form of anxiety, anger, judgment, frustration, and all of that. If we learn to look at that more effectively, without, and more like, we call it as choicelessly, that means we're not getting into it, we're not pursuing a thought process, or we're not giving it food, you're not identifying with it, but we are actually just looking at it for the sake of looking and understanding how our mind functions. So when we do that, it is very effective for us to learn about ourselves. So that is another part of self-discovery, another part of learning about ourselves, which is our mind. And then realize that as we become slowly about understanding how the mind functions, we don't have to react that way, because you are in control. You are the masters of your mind. You don't have to respond the way you did before, because now you're looking at it. Before, you didn't know that you could look at it, so it was a reflex, which is what your being did, as a matter of getting angry, just like that, or just getting frustrated or anything like that. So what happens with that, as a consequence of the reaction, your whole body suffers, because it goes through this whole fight or flight stress response, which is the release of chemicals and all of that, which is what causes the heart to race and the become short of breath, shallow breath, your gut being a problem, your stomach hurts, your whole body hurts, because you carry all these things and everything. So the body becomes like a receptacle for all these processes which are happening from the mind as a result. So obviously can't go anywhere. So the body is taking the brunt of it. And unfortunately, we only realize when the body's involved, because it hurts in somewhere or the other in the body, whether it's the chest, or whether it's the breathing, or the gut, or the muscles, or bones, whatever it is. So that is the only time we pay attention. But unfortunately, what happens is we pay attention to symptoms, and we want symptom relief instead of looking at the complete root cause, which has been your mind. When we go up to that, and it's not about easier or anything like that, at least it gives you a chance to know more about yourselves. And that can be achieved through meditation. When you're going beyond your mind, you're not involved in your mind, you are in a steady state, which allows you to look at it like that. So we want people more and more to be like that all through the day, so that they're really aware of how the mind functions. And that's why we take breaks in between, deep breaths, to cut away from the loop, even if it did go, because it's a mental habit, it's a thought habit. We all do. It's for a lifetime, but how much can you master your mind and stay in that anchored peace or anchored steady state is the question. So the more you do that, you become masters of your mind more and more as you go along. But yeah, you have to work at it. So that state is a sense of freedom from being bound by the mind, and a state of peace, calmness, which is not affected by outward issues which are going on, whether in the society, whether in the environment, whether it's your family, anybody around you, relationships, people, or anything happening in the world, anything like that. You stay in the steady state, and meaning like, I would say call it more calmness and peace, which allows you to use the mind as an instrument for possibly help the situation or possibly help other people around you. It's a state of energy, humongous amount of energy in you, like from really head to toe. You feel the surge of energy and a state of conservation of energy where you're not losing anything, which we all know we do when we use our mind into whatever fields of thought, where it become drained after a while, when you're trying to think and think and think and resolve conflicts in your mind, and one part of the mind talking one thing, the other part of the mind talking something. You're fighting with each other in different parts of the mind, or with somebody else in your mind, things like that. So it is exhausting, and the energy is exhausted. You don't have any energy left. So it's an immense sense of energy conservation, and you feel whole. You have energy for everything you want to do. You live a good life because you're enjoying every moment of the day, staying in the present moment, not allowing your thoughts to go in the future or the past, which is again energy debt. Because again, every time you have a thought or your mind races, the energy goes in, because every amount of thought will have like a energy drain. And these are also things, because then it affects you physiologically, your body, consequentially, about how it drains your body, because it's the messaging which is to the body saying, I am good or I'm not good. When you're stressed out, you're not good. So those kind of hormones are not good for the body, because then you get weaker. Every system of the body is used for not good purposes, but really for not so good purposes. So, and that also affects your health, meaning your physical health. So that's how closely mind body is connected. So what are the difficulties which people face to achieve this state of self-mastery? The problem is, again, your subconscious programming from before, which creates your reflexes for everything which goes on around you. And some of them your subconscious justifies too, saying that it's okay, it's reasonable to be like this, because blah blah blah, because I would naturally feel angry if somebody behaved like that. And you think that is justified. But we know that it doesn't work like that. The moment you give your energy away to a person or a situation, then you're no longer masters of yourself. You do not want to give that power away to anything or any person or any situation, any circumstance, anything in the past or anybody. So what does that mean? Because that means that you take the power back in you and say that whatever has happened. When I have the power, and that is where the the immense kind of responsibility comes, which is 100% responsibility, absolute personal responsibility. Because that means that even if that person behaved a certain way, there has to be something in me, some kind of insecurity, is something lacking in me that is triggering me to behave like that to that person. So some kind of something that I don't feel good about myself, or something is lacking in me. So if you really look at it, that's usually what, because everybody doesn't trigger you. Why do some people trigger you? Doesn't mean they're right or they're wrong. I mean, they're right or they're behaving good. But if we can decide that whatever the person or the person behaves, or however the person behaves, is nothing to do with us and at all, and it never is. And it is purely based on whatever choice that person is making at that state, at that situation, from the state of mind that person is. And that is all it is. Our response could be much different if we looked at it like that. So it will not be one of anger and frustration, because again, it's drain in the energy. So I think taking responsibility of every situation like that, and not reacting like that, and being calm and I wouldn't say rationalizing, but more in understanding where that person is coming from whatever state of mind. You don't have to understand, but because you will never understand whatever state of mind that person is, and you just keep quiet and let them just blow off their steam or whatever they have to do, and you be in your steady state, you be in your calm state, you be anchored in your peace. And that is self-mastery, and that will definitely come more and more but you have to use it. You have to remind yourself of who you really are, and why, and how you're not going to get triggered, and why, and and how. So these are things which you can do by taking 100% responsibility on yourself, because that's all you can do, first of all, because the only person you can change is you. You cannot change anybody else, and you don't have to. That's the point. It's not like fatalistic, like, oh my God, I can't do anything about it. No, you can do a lot about it, because when you are in the state of calm, your whole perception changes. It's almost like a paradigm shift. It's you just don't look at it things the same way you did before, and that makes a huge difference, because then you're not triggered by that person or the other person or a situation or the circumstances which occur around you. So that definitely looks like a state of self mastery. So we have certain programming in the subconscious, and which we're not aware of. And this has been created over time, ever since, it started probably in utero, even when, the baby was conceived, or when we were conceived in the womb. So what happens is, and since we're not aware of that programming, some people may not even know who triggers and what triggers them. It's just a reflex, just like, reflex has been created when you put your hand in the fire and your body tries to pull your finger off. It's very similar to that, because we've created these subconscious programming over time, and it just happens. But when we observe these things, then we realize that we may not exactly know where it's coming from, but it's enough to realize that you're in control and you don't have to react like that, because of the fact that these situations can be left alone independently, and you don't have to be reacting that way. And why is it undesirable? Because it feels awful. It doesn't feel good. There's a whole set of reactions happen in the body, which is definitely not desirable, which is uncomfortable, which is, feels like heavy, which is energy draining, which just gives physiological symptoms like headache and chest discomfort and tightness and all those things. And people go by, that mostly. That's what's undesirable. But those are all created over time, these reflexes by us, because of our own, whatever we have built over time, through our, whatever kind of programming has been built because of circumstances, and not knowing that this is becoming a programming, because you're not aware of these stimuli and thoughts which are developed, and the emotions which come after it, and the feeling which develop over time. So it becomes more like your conditioning and long-term programming, and it just keeps going on and on until you really realize, or you never realize for a lifetime, and you just get sick and sick, and the body deteriorates, and finally people die. So this is something definitely which we can do about. And if we get more conscious about, noticing these things, it is really helpful for us to get into a state of self-mastery. Whenever somebody's triggered, what can they do about it is the question. Firstly is through conditioning, through the tools offered by Angel Wing, one has to really get into the state of calmness overall. Because what we're trying to do by using these tools on a regular basis is change your baseline, essentially, meaning change your baseline from anxiety to a state of, peace and calmness. So when you do that on a regular basis, when somebody triggers you, you can breathe at that point and achieve that state quickly, because you're already doing it. And what that does is it gives you a few seconds to actually use your prefrontal cortex or your brain to respond differently. Most of the time what happens is it is so inbuilt, the short loop, as I call it, that you don't have time to even think. The prefrontal cortex is not even open when you are in that stressful situation. That is why the subconscious programming is the one which erupts, and that's why sometimes some people, the programming is so dense, or so dense is the right word I can use, that it just happens. And that's why some people cannot control anger. And some people have these need anger management or in a whole different way. So this is why it's important for people to know themselves and use these tools on a regular basis. So then they have a few minutes or a few seconds, I shouldn't say minutes, to actually breathe and respond very differently. Because when you do that without any emotion, without that programming, it's good for them, and they make good decisions at that time also. And they can come across to that other person in front of them very calmly and diffuse a situation of conflict. It doesn't have to escalate to anything, because when two people are in conflict, neither of them are using any of these tools. So they just are both yelling and maybe even hit each other, and it escalates into a bad situation when people can get hurt, and nothing is beneficial at that point. So I think that's why those tools are important on a regular basis, so that you can actually use that in a state of conflict. Somebody triggers or a situation is triggering you, which will definitely help you be in a good state of mind, meaning analytical mind, where you can, or a logical mind, where it can actually tell you exactly what you should be doing, instead of the programming, or succumbing into programming which is already there. So the question is, in a state of conflict, is it that you should be completely non-reactive, or be interactive, which is useful for that situation? Non-reaction doesn't mean that you're not triggered. So there are two ways of fight or flight. One is yelling and screaming and being angry, frustrated, and irritated. The other one is freeze. That means you're so frozen in the state of shock that you cannot react. And that's another non-reactive. So that is not good either. It's not any different from being triggered in one way or the other. So essentially, it's one is outwardly, one is internally. Both are damaging. So that's not what we're talking about. We're talking more in terms of actually being in a steady state by breathing and using those tools at that time, which will come easier if you practice enough during the daytime. It cannot come easier all of a sudden. You may know the tools, and if you've not practiced on a regular basis, your subconscious doesn't reprogram itself so quickly, because the old programming comes in between, and then it will actually make you triggered. Either you react, or you hide, or you freeze. We don't want those. So that's why those tools are important. So you can actually interact, give them a breather. If somebody's yelling in front of you, take deep breaths. So when you're talking in a very soft tone, very clear. You could be stern, even not in a not conflicting, not in like an aggressive tone, because that allows your brain to open up, the prefrontal cortex to open up enough that you can actually say the right words, which come across. That doesn't mean you're agreeing with that person either. But people, if you really look at it, what triggers people is your tone of voice, how loud you get. Sometimes they don't even pay attention to what you're saying. If you're loud and angry, they're looking at your body language and everything, and they become triggered already. So it escalates the whole thing. So, but when you are calm and saying the same words with a different body language, very calmly, it's the person is approachable. That means that person calms down, gives them a few seconds to actually calm themselves down also. And then they're open, their prefrontal cortex can be open also. So when you are having that interaction at that time, it is much more sensible. When you're talking, the other person is listening, but sometimes it doesn't always work, but it's beneficial to you. You have no control over the other person, but at least you are not in a state of test or flight or fight, or stressful state, or angry, or anything like that. You're calmer. So you could have said the same thing in a nice way and everything. And you can be steady in that state. And that is self-mastery. Is there a possibility of mastering the trigger itself? The tools which you're using on a everyday basis, you're trying to be aware of yourself first, because the trigger just doesn't happen. Everything and everyone doesn't trigger you. There's only certain things which trigger you. So it's almost like a mirror for us to look into ourselves and say, why do these things trigger me? There is subconscious, some programming which is triggering me. And so the fault or the issues within ourselves. And that is why it escalates whatever from the outside. The outside is just a stimulus. If I am steady, nothing can trigger me. People can go about being angry, you only feel bad for them and more compassion towards them. But that gives us a chance to actually reflect upon ourselves. That is why we have to be aware of a structure and function of our mind. Every time we go through our day, we have just watch ourselves about how our thoughts are, what happens. Somebody triggers you. Why did it trigger me? What is in it that is triggering me? And when we work on ourselves, it just lowers. And eventually that trigger is gone. So that the moment you do not take up responsibility in yourself and you give it over to the circumstance or people or the trigger, whatever that is, then that's an issue. Because then you'll always be triggered. There is no way you're not going to be triggered. So every time that person comes in front of you or you're put in the same situation, you're all over, you're the same like you were before. But if you understand that in yourself, then that trigger will not be a trigger anymore. The question is, what is the structure and a function of the mind? So I'm going to try my best to answer this the way I look at it. So when I am aware of my thoughts, again, thoughts comprise the mind, right? Most of it. So you have to look at it as a field, and where the thoughts, when they come from somewhere in the subconscious because of some recordings in your memory in the brain as well as the subconscious mind, which is bringing up these things. And it's usually connected to something happened then, and things connected in the past, and it gives rise to thoughts. So essentially, the appearance of the thoughts and how the field looks like is the structure. Now, the functioning of the mind is what you do with those thoughts. Meaning, are you going to feed it and it loops, it connects to 10 other things and 1,000 other things, and then what it becomes of it? Is it so scattered, or can you direct it a certain way to achieve clarity, like the way you want to? You can see how your mind works. For example, you're thinking about something, and something else pops up in your mind, and then the mind goes and pursues that thought, and then that thought, and then that thought. So that is the function where we connect one to the other. But appearance of the thoughts in a thought field is the structure. Realizing that what your structure of the thought field looks like in the mind is important, but then how the mind functions is also important. So now if you don't feed the thought, if you don't identify with that thought, you just look at it as if you're observing somebody else's mind, helps you to stay or disconnect from looping and continuing this whole fragmentation again. Because again, nothing is connected as you look at it. You sometimes you don't know how you landed up from completely one subject to completely a different issue. But that's how the mind jumps, or the thoughts jump. So that's the function of the mind, which I have noticed in my experience. What do you mean by identification of the mind? Identification is everything. Think about when I ask you the question, or when I ask myself the question, who am I, or what am I? Okay, I am Chetana Kripalu. I was Chetana Ranganath before I got married. I was born on such and such a date to these two parents. I have no siblings. Then I grew up here and there, wherever that was in India. I was a student at some point. Then I was a college student, first a school student. I had so many friends. All this is based on accumulation of memories in your mind, or whatever happened, or what you've been told. So it's all a sum of what you've gone through in your life, but what you've carried in your mind, and it's been recorded in different parts of your brains. Now, those are broad concepts. Now, what we are talking about, which is harmful for us as far as identification of the mind, is we record certain things which happen in our life, and we compare it to other people's experiences. Then we compare it to the societal norms, and then we include, or we connect it to certain belief systems we've acquired over time from outside. So all these play a part about sometimes, which is a mush in your mind. So when you're so identified with, so you can call it as living in your mind, because that's all you know, because that is what you've identified, you've told your identity is. You don't even know you're beyond that. You could be separate from your mind or your body or everything. You've always lived in the mind body complex. So you identify everything based on what your mind tells you, even about the body. If your body hurts in the knee, your mind is telling you that the body is hurting in the knee, which is important. It's not that it's not important. But beyond a certain point, the mind records a certain image of the pain in the brain, and it keeps giving you that stimulus, even when the knee or even in that part is repaired. Or sometimes it doesn't repair because of that stimulus from the brain saying, you're not okay, you're not okay, you're not okay. That's the thing about identification of the mind, a lot of it, which doesn't allow us to move out of it and actually enjoy, or I would say live a good life, because they become obstacles now. They're not allowing us to do a lot of things in your life because it becomes limitations. So the certain belief systems are there in your subconscious mind now, and that will keep coming up. They'll be your blocks, even if you want to change or anything like that. So those are all the how identified we are with our minds. And when you live in it, that is why sometimes you feel if this is all there is in life, people have depression, people have so depressed sometimes because they're so involved in what has happened to them. It's not good. It's the worst thing happened to me. If this is all there is in life, things like that. This is all in the mind chatter constantly. So when you become so identified, so people, that's why go into suicide, and people don't want to live in the head like that. And they don't know any other way. So this is why people don't want to live in this world, because they think the world is this. Unfortunately, they don't know if there's a better way, which is out or transcending the mind and the body. And there is another space in you. When we go inwards, you realize that this is just not it. There's more. So what does self-mastery look like, in the sense that what do we do with our mind if we become the masters of our mind? How, or what are we going to use it for? The idea is we are actually taught, everybody has goals, everybody has visualizes certain things they want to do, but there's blockages, there's saboteurs, there's obstacles in us which doesn't allow us to do things. And sometimes it's the mind is so cluttered, and we are so much identified with the mind, with the past and everything, that it doesn't even allow us to visualize what we want in life. Because most people, if you ask them through their circumstances and what's happening in the world, they know what they don't want, but they don't have time, or they don't even think it's possible because of to dream something else other than all the negativities in their life. So what it allows us to do when we become masters is firstly to live our life the way we want on our own terms. And what that means is visualize what do we want to do in our lives? How do we want to be in control of making things come the way I want, or manifesting things the way I want to. So if somebody gave me an example of David, who the sculpture of creating this sculptor who's creating a sculpture is chiseling off, and he's so focused on, and so he has this visualization how it turns, how he wants it to be looking, or how he wants this to turn out, that he, by the time at the end of the sculpture is materialized, it's so beautiful that it's unimaginable. How does that happen? It happens because all these blocks, which was in his mind, has one laser focus and such clarity in his mind that he's able to do that. So that's the benefit of being masters of ourselves, is we become more clear. We have more clarity in our lives. We can visualize more. Does that mean the obstacles are gone? No, even if there are obstacles, we know how to overcome that. We know how to go beyond that, because we don't give importance to those obstacles anymore. So when we go there with that much clarity, we have more focus. We don't have the chatter like we used to before, and we know how to overcome the chatter or let it be and still focus on what we want to do. So you chisel out a sculpture or visualize whatever you want and achieve it. We're all in here in this world to, and this for a purpose, which is on everyday life. How do we sculpt out these things almost every day, every moment? And you live on your own terms. And that is very powerful. You live the most empowered life completely. You're able to create, you're able to manifest, you're able to do whatever you want and whatever it takes, because you're not giving into these obstacles, so-called obstacles, or what the mind can bring up. So you're really being the masters of your mind, where you can use it as a tool for you to live a beautiful and an empowered life. I think that's the biggest advantage. How does self-mastery help in overcoming things like addictions or trauma, past trauma, and which causes people to go into depression and so-called suicide and etc. from all of the many of these issues? So let's talk about things like trauma and everything. There are so many things which happen in life to people as you go along. Everybody's different. Life journey is different. The first thing we need to understand is the world doesn't revolve around us. That means that we have this feeling that these problems, what I have been through, is the worst problems ever. Second thing is the world, our life has to be so reasonable that only good things should happen to me. Then also to say, we have a certain expectation that if I live a good life, nothing bad is going to happen to me. And if all these things have happened, I need to be fixed, or I need to be treated. I need it to go away. So all these are concepts. They're all belief systems we've formed socially. We've been told all of these things, and that's a problem. So we have to go beyond that and say things happen in life. So the acceptance is important. I am not the only one who goes through things. And this is caused, I don't know why, I don't need to know why, because there's not always an explanation which is rational in our mind. And if we think about it, that we're all collectively responsible, like the whole world, all the human beings, for causing certain things. And what we need to do is set that on the side and not having the need to be fixed, or not having the need to compare ourselves to other person and say they went through nothing and I've been going through all of this, so I deserve more, or I deserve better, I need to be treated better. These are all the false perceptions which we have, which is a problem, in an obstacle in itself. So we have to go beyond that and say that there's things happen to people, there's lots of things happen to different people, everybody has their life journeys, everybody has their ups and downs, and that is life. We have ups and we have downs, we have ups and we have downs. But again, it's perception of how we perceive things. If we perceive things as really bad or really good, it's a problem. We got to neutralize that and say, you know what, things happen in our life, but I'm in control, because I have the power to respond differently to these situations. And that's humongous. That is empowering yourself, and not even taking back the power. You're being more powerful, because then no matter what happens in your life, you're like, okay, this happened, but I'm not taking it to a level that it should not be happening to me. It's the worst thing which happened to me, and I need to fix it. I need to make it go away, because none of that will happen. So the whole point is to say that, oh, this happened, but I am going to grow from inwards to find the more potential that I have. It's an experience for me to go inwards to know more about myself. How do I even dig deeper and say there is something more I need to learn about myself, and not keep it there. So I think when we use these tools, then we are able to not make it a reason to break us or to escape the world, because meaning escaping your mind is the issue here, not escaping the world. If you die, you're carrying your mind again with you. It's not that it's going to go away. So we have to learn to go beyond that and not give it importance, because the more importance you give to these justifications and this mind, it will give you bigger reasons for you to behave that way and go more deep into depression. So I think that is the way to use these tools, not to always say, why me, why me? Those are the things. Victim mentality never works. Always saying, I deserve this doesn't work. Entitlement doesn't work, because why are we special? Everybody's the same. Everybody goes through things. They may not be vocal about it. They may have other issues. So that is why we have to say that this is a collective thing which has happened. I'm just a part of it. I'm just this part of this whole picture. And I'm going to do my best in how I can contribute for my life to be great. By doing that, it's actually helping the mankind, everybody, and all of us in it are in it together. So I think that's the biggest thing I learned in my journey, that when you approach things like that, it's just humongously helpful, and you are becoming masters of yourselves. Is self mastery a state of joy, or is it a cyclical pleasure and pain? It's a state of joy. We are not talking again, what is pleasure and what is pain, right? Yes, it may be two parts of a coin, but only if you give too much weight to one or the other. Meaning, if I give too much weight to pleasure, then you will have to go through pain, because then you get attached to pleasure and you don't want the pain. So the idea of self mastery is to be in a steady state where you are learning to perceive everything equally as much as possible. So in pleasure, you are not so attached to the pleasure that you don't want pain, but when pain comes, you're completely going down, cyclically, like going up and down. That is again being drawn into the mind. We are trying to stay steady and anchored in that peace at the real self. We're able to watch these, how your mind goes and everything. So you're experiencing everything, but you're not attached to it. So that's where you want to stay anchored in your peace, to look at these equally. So you're going through experiences in your life, but you're not affected by it, deeply. Yeah, you may be affected a little bit. We're all humans. But as you're doing that, you're just experiences in life. You're not taken in so down by the pain, or you're taken in hugely with the pleasure part of it. This is Dr. Chetana Kripalu, and I am going to talk about what my views are on personal transformation. Personal transformation is one of the vision of Angel Wing. There are three main, I would call it vision, but what I would like to see in an individual is self-mastery, which brings about a transformation, which is individual, which is what personal transformation is, and ultimately leading to human upliftment. So what does personal transformation look like? Let me go back a little bit into the self-mastery so that I can get a continuation of from there to see what personal transformation looks like. So what is self is the question we discussed about in self-mastery. So what we think about the self, or our identity about the self, is all accumulated from other sources except our own. That is the whole key about self-discovery, knowing who we are or what we are, and mastering our mind is what self-mastery is about. Because if you look at all the identities we've created or accumulated over the whole life, since the time you were a child, is always been constructs of the mind, in the sense like what perceptions from outside, perceptions from people, perceptions from, when I say people, your own parents, your peers, and society, and from TV information, from YouTube, your information from Google, all kinds of things that has allowed us, or kind of allowed us to form our own belief systems. And all these things happen in our mind, which is I would call it like a field, which is radiated or around the brain. Brain is an anatomical organ, but then, there is this whole field, we call it mind, or field of thought. So which is what creates the false identity of the self. But we discussed about how or what we can do about self, the real self, and how do you discover that real self, and go into the mastering our mind by going behind the thought, being aware of our thoughts, being aware of every thought which comes through, so that we know which ones are valid and which ones we need to do something about. So it gives us that power. So that is what we call it as self-mastery. Now, when somebody has reached, I wouldn't say reached, even understood and is practicing the process, or is in the path of self-mastery, then there is no doubt there is a transformation. And what is the transformation is the state of mind itself. Because if you know that you are not the mind, your whole original, you can go back to your original state, which is not what we were in before the self mastery or before self discovery, and then so forth, leading to self mastery. So we thought, because that is why, if you really look at it, what happens when you're not master of yourself, or when you're not the master of your mind, your brain or your mind is fragmented, because there is a constant change in your mind based on the outside stimuli, whatever is perceived from the outside. So 1 minute it could be good, in 1 minute it could be bad, and it's again depends on how one views it, good or bad, or but it nevertheless it just kind of changes all the time. So if we identify our lives with our mind, then it's a constant flux, which is rapidly changing every minute or moment to moment. And that is why when we get identified with that, we go through a lot of emotional lability, because thought is followed by emotion and feeling. And so it's a big charge. So we have this drain of charge as we go up and down, up and down, up and down. But if we come to a point where we realize, and what I call it as go behind the thought, or help or learn to just hide behind these thought processes and watch them, which allows you to gain control of the thought process and not let it go into this constant flux, then you're not giving them charge, you're not going into it, which is not a meaning, not identifying it, not pursuing the thought, which is what causes the thought loop, right? One thought leads to the other, then it leads to the other. And before you know it, you don't know how you ended up from one point to the other. And we always wonder, and then you're exhausted, because every time you think, you identify with it, and then you pursue it, then your whole energy goes with it. And so mental exhaustion happens with that. So when we talk about transformation, that is what happens is when you go behind the thought, your energy is not wasted, or it's not given away to your thoughts. And so it's conserved. And no matter what is happening around you and the outside world, you are in a state of calmness, in a state of equanimity, or you can call it as homeostasis. There's plenty of words, synonyms for that, meaning you are not affected by your environment or your surrounding, which is helps or allows us to take better decisions, because we are in a relaxed state, and allows us to navigate our lives very differently. And it is more enjoyable in many ways, and than one. And you're really part of this journey, or you're a part of this experience, which is an amazing experience, versus when you're not behind the thought. So for and going with the thought process and up and down, it could be really, really emotionally draining. And that's why a lot of people get exhausted, and you're not able to live your life fully with joy, with love, with compassion. All those things are good emotions to have, but it doesn't happen because we have forgotten who we are and do not associate or identify ourselves with that real soul, or you call it as the real self. So this is my idea of transformation. Transformation obviously is not change, because change doesn't have to be permanent. And what I mean by that is, again, it's the caterpillar butterfly example, because once it's metamorphosed, morphosed from the caterpillar to butterfly, there's no going back. And so the transformation is definitely from inside out completely, where you go into a state where it's irreversible. What we mean by that is in a good way. Obviously, we're not talking about, in a destructive way. And I don't think there is another way of transformation, what I am talking about. Even destructive way is actually a temporary thing. The real transformation we're talking about is almost like eye-opening, or it's something like an awakening from deep sleep, or an illusion, or When you go into, for example, a movie theater, and you're watching this movie, you're associating yourself, you're identifying with yourself with some part of movie, meaning the actor, the actress, or whoever else in the movie, and you've become so part of the movie. And of course, part of the fun is to be enjoying it, but what happens at the end of the movie, when it's over, you know that it's a movie, and you come back and dissociate from that. And okay, even though you have memories and everything, and you're not happy that it's over, everything, but you know that it's over. So it is in those lines, even our lives, is when we realize the true self. And I'll come to that, meaning who we really are and what we really are. Then your whole life changes, and you really are awakening from a total, I would say, illusion of life which you've been living in. And I think that is huge, because when you awaken from that state, from the state you're in right now, into the real true self or true state, that is definitely a true transformation, which means that you it is not you will not want to go back to the previous state which you had identified yourself with, because that is what was causing a lot of problems, meaning it was causing you to not like the state, not be wanting to be in that state of flux, which is going up and down. One day you're feeling good, one day you're not feeling good, one day you're extremely happy, one day you're sad. Even though these are all emotional experiences, and it's okay as a human being to go through it, but we identified so much, we live in it, and that is what we don't want to. So the transformation has to be realizing that it was all an illusion. Who we are is not what you identified with all along. That gives you the power actually to now live your life the way one wants to, and not the way you have to, because of circumstances or because of wrong identification. And that is not enjoyable at all. So that is what is transformation for me, from one to the other, which is permanent. Coming back to what true self, which I'm talking about. Now, we know of examples where we can really know that there is something more to us than just this physical body, which we've seen. Even not even the mind. We are talking, yes, through the mind, we know that, we're not just the body here, when what we see, your flesh and blood and skin and all the organ systems and all that. That is because we have to function a certain way on this earth. So we have this vehicle, which is what I call. But even a simple meditation, like, when we sit down, close our eyes, really assume an erect position, and focus on one point between the eyebrows, just to keep your mind static, and watch your mind or your thoughts, and see how it flows through, without identifying with the mind, without identifying with any thought. Just one can observe their thoughts. It's called like an observer meditation. What happens there? Genuinely, if you just do this observation and not either stop a thought when it comes through because you don't like it, or not start something because it's intriguing, or not pursue something. When we do that, you really see that, first of all, what is or who is observing these thoughts? If not you, if we identified previously with the thought each time, right? You wouldn't be able to observe it. So there is something more to you than just the thoughts. And the second thing is, after a while, the thoughts stop. So then who are you? And then what are you? So there is something more there. We can call it love, happiness, and not happiness, joy, calmness, whatever we call it. But the idea is to do these observations and meditations to understand, firstly, that we are beyond our mind and our body. And that allows us to, or empowers us to say that I have control of my life. And I don't mean control of life in the sense like control of everything happens, to us or for us. It's more about how we navigate and how we can navigate through life, because we don't have control of our outer circumstances, because it's not just us who's involved. It is a collective. All the trillion people in this world are involved. Can you imagine all of us putting out like antennas out, these vibrations out in the field? So things happen in our lives which we have no control over, but still we have a control over our thoughts. Like we said, we want to observe and not identify with it. We have control of knowing that we can actually watch our thoughts and let it go and not get involved in it and not give too much of importance to it, knowing that some of these thoughts are in the past, or most of our thoughts in the past, and even though there were eventualities in the past, it is still the past. So when we let go of these events, of course, I'm not talking on letting go of memories. Your memories are always going to be there. It cannot be erased. But the charge which goes with it, the emotions go with it, is what we're talking about. So if you let go of all of those, saying that it's happened and this is my life experience and so be it. And then also not to project the past experiences to the possible future. This is what goes on as almost like cyclically, like day in and day out. We're thinking of the past and afraid of the future because we think it's going to happen again. And then we don't leave it at that, right? We just extrapolate stuff like if and add a lot of stuff to it, depending on whatever happened to X, Y, and Z. It didn't even happen to us. So the possibilities are endless, but it never does. We know in our lives, if you look at your even individual past, 80, 90% even of the times, the things we imagine would happen to us and how we would feel about it, it will destroy us, skies would fall, all those kind of things never ever happen. May have like point whatever 0.001% of the time, but still we are so conditioned in thinking or projecting the past to the future that we live in it. And this is the cause of the suffering. So what is the cause for that? It's your mind. So that is why you have to get behind the thought, not give it importance. Get behind the thoughts. Every time the awareness has to come in. That's why, Angel Wing provides certain tools, as reminders. You can remind yourself saying, hey, wait a minute, even like in the middle of the day, what do you feel? How are you feeling? And what are you thinking? Because mostly they go together. And that allows us to come back to the present moment. So what does it mean? That means in the present moment, the mind is completely out of the way. You're just enjoying the current moment to what it is. And most of the time it is excellent. It is beautiful. The current moment is all it is. So we forget to live in the moment and always live in the mind. And that is why, and living in the mind is horrible because, like we said, it's fragmented. It changes. It's in a state of flux almost all the time. So imagine going through the flux up and down, how exhausting it is. So that exhaustion is what causes us to go to some extremes sometimes. Some of the people who live in it in this deep state of anxiety or depression, don't want to be there anymore physically because they think it's because we're in this world and because in this body is why we're going through it. Unfortunately, if you really learn to go behind the thought and just let it pass, just let it go, and you can do it at any part of the day. Literally, when it comes rushing at you, just get behind, just take a step back and detach from your thoughts and see like how you're an observer. And that's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is one has to practice some meditation to get into the calm mode. And you can just even do it with just breathing. You can go into that space which you have created, which is calm and happy and love and just peace, and drop into that, periodically in the day when things come at you, because because you have that haven there, which is amazing. It's your heaven, your haven, however you want to call it. That is your space. You can always go into it. It doesn't cost any money. You don't have to do anything. All you have to is, just like we go back to other memories, we go back to that. How did it feel when we had that meditative bliss, or that that time, even if it was 5 minutes, it felt like an eternity. So we could do all of that. And once we do that, then we learn to live in that state most of the time. Of course, life is going to challenge you, and that's okay too, because that is what life is all about. We don't want it to be mundane. And one might ask, when you get into that state, isn't it boring? No, we're not asking you to be indifferent. We're actually learning to not be attached or entangled in that experience. So that is the difference between when you're transformed and going behind the thought, is you only do that when it's all negative thoughts mostly, because you want to let it go. And they're positive thought, you can actually enjoy the whole journey, but not want to crave for it all the time, because again, life is a mix of up and down. If you're going to have ups, you're going to have downs. It's just the way it is. During the ups, you stay in the ups, and the negatives, you just say it's also a part of your experience, and not give it too much of value, like fight it, rather than saying that I shouldn't be feeling like that, or this thing should not be happening to me and have to fix it. Those are all the things which makes us go deeper and deeper into the flux we were talking about. So if we want to not stay in that, we don't have to be judgmental about all the things which happen to us, and just go with the flow with, like I said, like some state of equanimity, which is what you transform into, that state we are talking about, which allows us to navigate our lives way differently and with more fun, with an appreciation of how we are all a part of each other, because that is the only way it happens. When you get transformed that state, you also realize that you are a part of each other. What does it mean? If I look at humanity as one big energy mass, we're all energy beings. I think by now we know that. And if I'm a part of that humanity, I'm a part of that energy mass. So that also happens because you learn to open up your heart, open up your brain, and, kind of become more expansive, and learn that we're all a part of each other, and not fighting with each other. Not that separateness also is gone. The separateness, becomes lesser and lesser. And that also allows us to appreciate one another for where they're coming from, and connect even deeper with the energy in them, or the soul in them, the soul material, the spirit in them. You can call it energy, the deepest energy. That is what we connect with people. If you really, there's an example, when something bad, a crisis happens in any part of the world, why do we feel so upset, or we go through a lot of sadness when this happens? But they're not our family. How does that happen? That is a single example of how they have a part of us in them, and that's getting hurt. So we are getting hurt. So it's like they're all other people, like in general, human beings, even other beings, they're all images of us, or mirrors of our own beings, of own inner beings. So when we touch that is when we start feeling for each other. And when you see there's all kinds of people in the world, there's some people who always want to do for others, who always are out there, don't care about their own lives, but they're helping other people. And I think that comes from a deep connection and more connectedness. So this is the connection we're talking about. We want to establish, which is also happens when you are in that state of transformation. And that allows us to be not limited to our own mind, not limited to our own body, or the limited few people in your life. It is much more expansive. Your family is the world family. It's not just somebody who's close to you, brother, sister, cousin, your children, all that. It is okay, because we have to have those relationships just because we come a certain way into this world. But every single soul is connected to us. So these are the things which starts happening when you get to a transformed state. And the realization of all this, awakening to your real state, is what we're talking about. And that's irreversible. So once you're transformed, you understand a lot of it which you never understood before. And that's not in the intellect alone. It is deeper than that. It's a state of realization. It doesn't occur in the state of in the intellectual mind. It is more an experience, a subjective experience. And it's hard to explain that in words or in language. So when that happens is when you realize that the real transformation has happened. And of course, everybody's journey is different from there, and it's magnificent. And so if we keep going on our paths to attain that full state where we realize how we're all one unit, then that is the state of transformation. I would say I would like to see in myself and everybody else in this world, in fact. What does it mean to mastering our mind? Having a control or having control of our mind. So that is, of course, hard. That is the base of the problem for all human beings. But what do I mean by that is, ideally, we want to be aware of every thought which comes through, meaning in our awareness. Why? Because most of the time, if you really look at it, we're not even aware of half, not even half, three-fourths of the thought processes which goes through. You're so engrossed in somewhere else that these things just happen. And that's why we move from one thought to the other and we get caught in the loop and we don't even know how. But awareness is the key. So first step is being aware more and more and more, however we want to do it. You would develop tools, reminders. People can have rubber bands here to remind them. The more often you are aware of these thoughts, you can do something about it. And the thoughts are the main parts of your mind. So let's say, for example, you are getting, or somebody triggers you and you're getting angry as an emotion. If you are aware of your emotions which are coming through, there's a difference there versus identifying with the anger and going full speed with it. So if you go full speed, what happens? You're pushing all the energy in the anger. It does whatever it does. It may even hurt the other person, and you don't feel good. You're physically, physiologically affected. It'll come down, but at a big cost. Versus if you are aware of this anger, you know that this anger is in you, even though the other person is triggering it. And you can use your tools like taking deep breaths, telling yourself good things, saying that it's them, it's not you, and things like that to calm yourself down and not allowing yourself to get into that thought processes. So, and what happened is a difference, because when you're calmer, you can rationalize better too, meaning your prefrontal cortex opens up, which is more of wisdom and intellect and everything. And you'll see the futility of getting into that anger or frustration. So that is what is possessing or mastering or having more control of your mind. And the more you do that, the mind is the mind construct is mainly for preserving humanity. What the mind is always trying to do is guard you from danger. There's different kind of danger, potential danger. They're not real dangers, but that's what the mind thinks it's doing, is it's protecting you. So that's why it gives you tools from before, like past experiences. It says, wait a minute, this happened in the past. It might happen again. So be careful, in those words. But it's not always true, because we know that life doesn't work like that most of the time. But if you're aware that the thought is coming through because of past experiences, and we're able to say that nothing's happening now, future I'm not going to worry about, and taking deep breaths, then the thought passes. And then you found control over your mind. You didn't allow your thought to take over, and so the thought to take your life over, or you over as a being. And that's what is mastering the mind, because that allows us to then use this source, a mind, which is for other functions, doing your daily work, doing intellectual work, thinking about creative ideas, everything. So because of us being in the negative state, most of the time these important functions in life is not happening enough. It may be happening, but it could happen more, so that you can see more of you, even in creative areas. So that is what it means by mastering your mind, or having more control of your mind. The mind is our priceless inheritance, definitely. That is the biggest difference between us and all the other mammals and all other animals. And we could use it as a doorway to know and get into our consciousness. And that is how you do it. Otherwise, you become like an automaton. You just go with the body reflexes, and that's it, like hunger and, like animals, sexual desires, cold, heat, thirst, all kinds of stuff. We know we are more than that. So mind is definitely a priceless inheritance, and it is used to focus on things, and really determination and grit. People have showed all these things, all the saints and sages who have achieved nirvana or enlightenment. How have they done it? Because of the mind. It's not because without the mind. We cannot live without the mind. So it is a priceless inheritance for us. The problem, what has become over time, generally, I would say for most part, is we are not using the mind appropriately to work for us. But even despite that, if you look around, anywhere you go, you look at all the tall buildings, you look at all the house we live in, look at all the flyovers, the framework of everything which you see in the world, which has been constructed by man, all these huge vehicles, automobiles. Every time I wonder, when I see these things, it's so massive outside. How did we as human beings who are so little come up with such expansive ideas? And that started with our mind. So mind is all powerful in both ways. Because the mind taking over is why we become slaves to the mind in a bad way too. So, but this is what we have to do. We have to regain control of our mind to be able to use it for upliftment of the humanity, to get more new developments as we see, respecting the planet, to work with us even more, so we can all live in peace. We can not all live in harmony together, and come up with even more creative things, whether it is outside things or, however we want to look at it. There's no end. It's infinity. So it is definitely a priceless possession. How is it not? That is why you have to look out. Even the computer keyboards and everything there is similar to is parallel to our mind. How did that happen? It's just amazing. We have become dependent on the computers. That's a whole different story. But it came from somebody's intelligent, amazing minds and creative minds. All the paintings, all the arts, all the instruments which make music, and the music itself, singing, playing all these instruments. It's just amazing what we can do with our beautiful mind. So it is definitely such a priceless, possession, that we would love, we want to honor it. We want to be grateful and a lot of appreciation for it. And that's why it's even more important for us to be in control and use it so beautifully that it brings about a transformation and mastery of the mind, to the extent that we can actually allow ourselves to have such a beautiful life. How can Angel Wing help to explore the boundless reaches of the mind, since we explained how priceless the mind, the possession of the mind is? And also, how can this exploration of our minds more expansively can provide as a internal pathway or a doorway into personal transformation? We know that, like we already said before, that our minds are very precious. It's priceless. And we have known this, like with our examples we gave about what we've seen outside, what your mind is capable of. What we have seen in life is, when we open up our minds without confining it to people or place or land or community or countries, then there is more possibilities, and the infinite possibilities are infinite. And one needs to really be expansive with our minds to realize the full potential. We may not even go to the full potential, but at least realize how much one can do in their lifetimes. Probably one lifetime is not enough. But however, if you really look at just the basic level as a like an atom of, like I was telling you about energy, humanity, we really are not different. Again, the separateness has been created by human mind again, not in a positive way, where we have differentiated ourselves as belonging to different cities, states, and countries and lands and everything. If you really look at the basis and become more open without having any boundaries in our mind, we're all the same. How are we different? We're not different at all. Everything in our bodies, from our internal, even physiologically, have the same human parts, same systems, the same perceptions, meaning the or sense organs, like your eyes, ears, nose, and skin, and which touch and taste, all of them. The only difference is our whatever belief systems we created, and that also is in our mind. So, and that comes with a little bit of being in the mind and being close, not the openness we're talking about. So if we do an experiment of really becoming more expansive and opening it up without having these boundaries, one can really find more and more similarities in each other, I mean, human beings, and the connectedness we have, as we have said before, about how we are at the spiritual level, as a spirit level or soul level, are connected so strongly. We're energy beings before the mind even came in. So that's the connection we have to establish. When we do that, then we can come up with so many creative ideas about surviving, not just surviving, but thriving on this planet together, making more and more, creating more and more things and more possibilities collaboratively, not just individually. And in those, there's a lot of ways to do that. But I think one has to come to, again, go back to a little bit of starting with a little bit of realization of the real self in us, and going behind our thoughts, beyond our mind, having control of the mind, which says different things, which is limited. That's, you can deconstruct that slowly, part by part by part, about the limitedness. And then it automatically opens up. It's like, it's hard to destroy things. It has to be, it's easier to let go of these limited beliefs. It's necessary to let go of these limited beliefs rather than avoiding it or suppressing it or judging it, saying, I'm not supposed to have this. Because again, the mind is fragmented. Remember, you have these feelings or these ideas, but then the other mind will tell you, other part of the mind will say, you're not supposed to do that because that's not the right way. But it's there. So we have to learn to just let go of these limited beliefs slowly, one by one by one by one, till it opens up itself and reveals the real self. So it's more like a self-revealing by going behind the thought, going behind the mind, and not letting it take over. Because then we're really like a hamster in a wheel. We're just there going in cycles back, round and round and round. There's no end to it. So unless we get off of it, and then we can watch it, and you can stop it. We're inside of it. It's not easy to stop it. So that is why I have realized in my life is going behind the thought, beyond the mind. The more you let go of things, there's more space created in your mind to come up with these creative ideas of being more expansive. How can you be of service? How can you be a part of this world, not just your own life? Because that is limited again. How can we be a part of each other? And I think those are the things which helps us when we explore more and more and become more expansive. And that in itself reveals the, self, which is your transformation, because that is like unfolding from, a bud to a flower. And that is self-revealing or awakening, you can call it. I think that is how it has to happen, or it happens. It's not, something, when we say about transformation, it's not a complete transformation of a whole different being. No, we are talking more of what we are already and revealing it in a way that you have transformed, and it's not going to go back to the previous state. The biggest problem comes, and how do we get stuck in the limitations of the mind, is because as we grow up from a state of an infant or newborn, and then we go along, all we have are perceptions, meaning how you perceive things with your sensory organs or senses. And that in itself is recorded somewhere in your mind. Plus, when you're young, your parents tell you few things, what they know, what they've been through, and they teach you certain things. So you take that into account. Then as you grow up, then you have your peers tell you certain things. And then you have your teachers tell you certain things. And then you have the media tell you certain things with news and, so many other things, information on the internet. Nowadays, so much information out there. So when you get bombarded by these things, there is a whole mix up of things or concepts in your mind, which is a total, the easiest ways to describe is like absolute mush, unless one tries to really go systematically trying to figure things out and everything. So, and during this course also on your own, we develop certain values, culturally so-called values or limited beliefs, certain belief systems. I'm not saying right or wrong. I'm just saying how it happens. So, when you go through life like this, anything which comes from the outside, what you're doing is you're always comparing it to your belief system, what you've heard of, all these things which are going on in your mind. And that's how these opinions come about, how these pull and push about liking, disliking, all those tug of war happens in your mind. So you get stuck, that's why, in those limitations. And the biggest thing you can do is first realizing through meditation that you have to go beyond this mind, which is doing all this stuff. And then as more with contemplation, more with introspection, more of examining things, maybe scriptures or philosophy, or however one wants to go, any path one wants to take, you want to really sit with it. And that's when you go behind the thought and allow yourself to slowly get out of these boundaries or the walls which we've created because of these belief systems, and even questioning your own belief systems. Okay, I acquired that because of X, Y, and Z and whatnot. But is it of value, any value to me at this point? And does it even mean anything? It may have meant something at that time, so you let go of it. So a lot of this has to be, the main practice has to be letting go of things. In fact, letting go of most of things. That's how, if you think about a room, for example, let's say you buy a new house and it's clean, like your mind when you're born, right? And then you're trying to buy things for the house. Every day there's a new package being dropped in the house. And of course, you're so busy that you work, you have other things to do, you have no time to sort it out and do whatever you want to do with this, with these boxes. So they're sitting there. So before you know it, this whole house is full of clutter and these boxes, which you've never taken time to examine and, do away with it. You may not need half of these things, but we still keep it. because we think we might be able to use it at some point. So I think one has to let go and clear it up periodically. That is one thing. The second thing is really learning to navigate life as it comes. Not, again, like I said, compared to whatever you have had before. For example, if suppose I am, I'm diagnosed with an illness, and let's say something really terminal, like some stage 4 cancer or something. The immediate response is, I have been good all my life. I have done everything possible, which is for others, from my family, blah, 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 whatever, all that stuff, right? But I don't deserve this. Why me? Why should I be the person who's going through this? And then you seek treatment. And then the treatment is, I have to fix this. I have to fight this cancer as we go along. I'm not saying any of this is wrong. I'm just giving you an example. So what I'm trying to say is, do you realize the mind construct of this whole thing is that I shouldn't be getting, life has to be wonderful. I have to be healthy all my life. I should not get cancer or any other terminal illnesses. And if I get it, I don't deserve it, but I got it. And so that is a thought process. It's a fight in itself in the mind. And then finally, I have to fix it. I have to fix it. I have to fix it. And if I don't fix it, that's how I live my life, till the end. And so what happens is, you have no room for creative thoughts or expansive thoughts or any of these, like I was telling you about the cluttered room. So you got to clear it up and really accept it. It's like there is a very famous philosophy of in Taoism, which is a branch in Chinese philosophy. And they talk about this concept of Wu Wei, Wuwei, which is going with the flow. And the whole thing came about one of the supposed saints. We don't know if there was a saint like that, but there might have been. We don't know the exact origin. But anyway, the whole idea is they came by looking at water. When you look at water, if you go in the mountains or rivers, how the waters come about is they just flow. There's no reverse flow. There's no resistance. If they see resistance like a stone or a boulder, they go around it or they go over it without stopping them. So that's how the river and the water flows. So we would want to live our life like that, without any of these constructs. So all these constructs and all these ideas, some of them may be good ideas. I'm not saying all of them, but nothing so rigid that you're always doing this, coming to a resistance, coming to a fight. And that is what causes problems, because it becomes bigger and bigger and magnifies and bigger. And there's no room then for expansiveness at all. So if we go with the flow, then there's enough room for creativity, more expansive, more, then it's boundless. Then there is no limits to this mind at all. What can we do? We even have realized, the saints and sages, that we are divine. How does that happen? We are co-creators of something even bigger in the universe. We are not even talking about these monuments and all of that, even more than that. People have, even materialized even things in the world. How does that happen? That's because of the power of the mind. So there is lots we can do, but we have to get to the point of not cluttering it up with all the useless things, all the false limited beliefs, I would call. I wouldn't say false, limited beliefs that we've developed. And the more and more we do that, then the more expansive happens and the awakening happens. It reveals itself and the expansion happens. Even things like staying out in the open or the nature. More and more you do it, you become more expansive because you adapt the frequency of the outside. If somebody's so inbound or closed in their homes, we're not beings. We shouldn't be at home all the time. And we become so depressed and we go crazy because I'm thinking about all the things which has happened in the past, and it makes you go crazy. So we need to do things in our lives which are going to be making us more expansive and not limited. So the idea about mind having infinite boundaries or limitless boundary was explored the last time. And the biggest examples is when you look around everywhere, constructions, the houses you see, the monuments you see, the buildings, the airplanes, the automobiles, machines, furniture, the sculpture, painting, arts, science, whatever you look at, it's actually all coming, all the creativity is coming from human mind. And so we know what it's capable of. And that is why it is limitless. Some of the things also, like, for example, people doing extraordinary feats, like climbing the Mount Everest, doing hundreds and hundreds of miles. How does that happen? It's just because they did not put limitations in their mind. And that is why we call it limitless. There is no boundaries. Of course, the other side of how you use the mind, not necessarily for the benefit of mankind, but just for selfish reasons or for destructive reasons, also we've seen all the terrorist attacks, and then those huge, nuclear bombs, things like that, all of them for devastation also. So that is why, to that extent, mind is limitless. But how can we use this mind power more and more wisely for the benefit of all? It is, firstly, we have to, I think, explore the idea about, and it's kind of like going to the base of who we are. Who am I as an individual? I think the reason I come to the basic question is, when we realize who we are, then we also come to the realization about our connectedness to other beings, other human beings, which would allow us to connect with each other in a whole different way, spiritually, in the sense like soul to soul, if you want to call it, spirit to spirit. And then that will help us create this unconditional love and compassion towards others, which is going to be the driving factor for us to be able to do good and be able to do everything possible and for others who are suffering. For example, hunger, people don't have shelter, people have diseases, in whatever way we can. The problem nowadays is everybody is so in their own minds about themselves, so self-involved. I wouldn't say selfish, but it's really self-involved, that the only they create limitations in their minds, only limited to themselves, their family, and maybe some of the friends. And that's a limitation in the mind again. If we expand it and really have no boundaries, then we can do as much as possible. And going back to the needs of a person, where does that come from? The desire is there, but I think when you look too much into the needs, to the extent that it goes on and on and on beyond the basic necessities, then obviously it's not easy for us to be able to use our mind wisely for others. I think we have to really explore our everything through the mind, of course, look into ourselves inwardly about all these things, to the extent of how do we look at ourselves? How do we look ourselves in relationship to the world or the universe? As we start looking at it and the connectedness, as I said before, then we know that it is almost each of us have a responsibility for others. I mean, I meant because they are a part of us. We are a part of each other. And that is the reason, I think, why we feel for others. And what I mean by that is, for an example, was the 9/11. And how do we know that? Is because they have machines nowadays or instruments to measure vibrations, and the higher vibrations versus lower vibrations because of the different brain activity and different waves. and they were able to measure this on across the globe when that event happened. It was not just the US. And there was such a surge in the vibration because the people had such compassion, so much of love for these people who lost their lives and the families and everything. So that kind of crisis brought people together because why did we feel that is, and I think the main reason why we feel that is because we're all one part of each other energetically and at different level, and we don't know it. We even interact energetically before even physical, because as soon as you walk into a room or for example, in a party, we're always already feeling certain things from certain people. And that is what makes us interact or get drawn towards some people. And even if we never knew them before, we always say, there's so many examples. We say, I don't know, son, there's something about him I cannot put my finger on. And that is so wonderful that you cannot help liking that person. So there's obviously an aura or a unique kind of vibrations we all emit. And that's because we're energy beings. And that's why we talk about that when we die, the flesh and blood dies, but we don't die really, because we just matter, energy just gets converted into a different state. So when we look at that, we really want to go inwards more and more through meditation, introspection, dialogues, reflections, and all kinds of things, so that we can go to the core of that issue where we really realize our connectedness with other human beings and other beings in general. We only talk about human beings is because that's the one we see suffer more because of behavior issues. And that is why when we go deeper, even beyond people's behaviors. So for example, we get stuck in the matters of, that person said this to me, so I don't like him, or that person's views are different, and so I don't agree with him. Yeah, they're all on the surface because everybody's come from a different background. They lived in a different place in the world. They're raised differently, all the way from conception to when they're born, and how they're young children and how they're raised. All these things depend, kind of modify their personalities because we use our mind to do certain things. And that is why from their mindset, they're correct and they're doing the right thing. So we cannot just go by that and discard the relationship and say, you know what, this is not going to be, it's really on the surface. But if we look at ourselves to the core about our own, I wouldn't say deficiencies, but blocks, subconscious blocks, obstacles, then we are able to remove them, and then we are able to look at other people in a different light, from a different angle, from a different point of view. So that helps humongously because you kind of discard all your likes and dislikes and biases you have for others, and that is hugely helpful for us to be able to function differently in the world, where we are all more collaborative and not competitive, trying to outdo each other, destroy each other, having more power over other people and subduing them, or you see all these crazy things happening in the world as genocide and creating reasons for killing people and wars and everything. These are all because we don't look inside and we don't realize who we really are as collectively. And even common sense, even if you don't have all these upbringing and everything, is that we're all human beings. Everything in us is exactly the same. The organs we have, from the skin to the sense organs to internal organs. How can that be? We look different, yes, because we are from different areas, different parts of the planet. And so that's pretty simple. But nobody wants to, I wouldn't say nobody. There's a lot of people who don't want to think like that because it's too much. Also, people don't want to think too much, I think, and I know I'm digressing from the topic, but just giving reasons why this doesn't happen, where people can use their mind wisely, is because you come from certain conditioning, you belong to a group who think differently. Now, if you're going to start thinking differently and you're not going to be a part of the group, then you feel lonely. Then you feel like you're an outcast. So there is a lot of these subconscious issues one has, and people don't want to get out of the group. They don't want to not belong to an association or a society or a group or a gathering. What just a name of different things which bring people together. And those are all things off surface. They're not real people from inside out. So that is why when we transform, that's the right word, when we say transform from inside out, that is when we can use our mind power to our advantage, because then now you're aware of your own mind construct and the way it functions. So you're able to use your mind so creatively for the benefit of others, where you are assisting and you are doing your best with your skills to help others be in a better state, whether it's physically or mentally or emotionally. It could be anything. The felt unity is kind of ties into what I was talking before, is the only time you can feel from inside out is when you start going into that path of self-discovery. Because when you uncover or remove the obstacles you have, all the subconscious blocks you've created because of our own upbringing and our own conditioning in life, is when we can do that and get into that state of that felt unity from inside out. So that is why the first step is self-discovery. And then we go into self-mastery. And that's where it starts. Once we are in the state of self-mastery is when we can get to the state of understanding or really experiencing this connectedness. It is very hard to experience connectedness or the unity just on the face of it, just by talking about it. So the only way you can feel it is at the core is when you know the real spirit or the real, your own real identity. The identity we have right now is all pretty much attributed from other people. But right now what we are trying to do is leave all that aside and delve deeper and really say, where are these things coming from? Is it really true? Is it really, or is it just a false reality? And because it's my own reality, and that's happened because of 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever reasons. And so we have to go in to, when you kind of dissect each one of these and or multitude of these, where it's coming from, then you realize at the core, we're all the same. If you really look at it, when we're born, we are all the same. We have no issues. We are the same innocent beings. So that soul or the spirit, is still there in us forever. How did we change? And the only thing we changed is our personality because of all the things we've gone through in our lives, which is circumstances which has left you to behave certain way, in the sense that has molded your thinking, that has molded your opinions about things, about people, about the politics, about, it could be anything, about fields in like science, economics, arts, and stuff like that. So that's how you create opinions based on what we go through in life. But then we don't delve deep enough to really realize what is the core in all of us and appreciate each other for what they are, exactly what they've been through. We could have diversity, like we always talk about unity and diversity. That means the unity is at the core level, which is the spirit level, but then you are diverse because of where you come from and your experiences. And that's actually a benefit to live in a society. If you really look at it, the skills one develops, the different opinions can be used to build a beautiful society where you're accepting everybody's, what is the right word, experiences and skills to create new things, to even make it more limitless. How much one can do with this world, come up with, but then at that level, When we are united, we are only thinking about the benefit of everybody else, like together, including us, not limited to just us and our family, our own family, like immediate family. So that is the difference when we get to that point where it is just a little easier. So the felt unity really comes from a lot of effort and hard work to let go of a lot of these conditionings, like opinions which we've developed, which doesn't serve us anymore, and only can do us harm. And even the desires we have will decrease as we realize are connected to people, because then we say we want the other people also to have what I have. It's not just me, and I'm very happy with myself and I don't want other people to have. So I think that that differentiation right now, or the separateness, is what's causing problems. How you can expand it to actually help others. For example, now you know your capacity in the mind is much more than it used to be. You've gotten rid of those obstacles or stress or walls which you've built up and everything, and then becomes easier and easier. So then if I want to run a marathon, I have to start from the first step. And once you've done a marathon, then you've already expanded and you know for yourself that, oh my goodness, this is an example of how how I thought I couldn't do it because I had set limitations in my mind, but now I can do it. So that overflows in other aspects of your life. Now you can, now you have the capacity, not just capacity, you will be able to broaden your perspective or mind to other things at work. You thought you didn't have confidence, you couldn't do the project well, then it'll overflow in that. Then you can use it in your personal relationships, whether it's with your kids or spouse or your partner, and anybody else. And it could be in different fields of life. So that is why one has to start there, and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Of course, you have to keep it going at every level. You're making choices, choices, choices. And the only way to do it is continue the expansion. And one of the biggest tools is meditation, because when you meditate, you get to the space where you do become expansive and realize your expansion. You're not limited, or you don't have these boundaries of what you thought you had. So those are the reasons why one needs to expand, going beyond your mind, and that to know who you are. You are the soul or your spirit or this being, energy being, which is much, much more than your mind or your body. And that is how you can use your mind effectively. And therefore, the body follows the mind. So this is very clear. We know that because when we have bad thoughts or negative thoughts, that people can get sick. And at the same time, you have energizing thoughts and really positive thoughts, people can heal. There's miraculous healings from diseases of cancer and everything. It's just not somebody didn't do it for them. It's that because they believed, and they set this expansion saying that I'm fine. I'm already healed. And that's the message sent to the cellular level, to the physical body, and then the whole process happens. So it is so clear about how one can actually, firstly, knowing that you're beyond you're more than your mind, and use it accordingly to being more expansive. But it has to start slowly. But as you become more expansive, then you can choose to act wisely for others. So the expansion, the question is, how does that happen? And whether does it happen while you're going through the personal transformation or after? Everybody has a different journey. So I couldn't tell exactly what happens, but all I can tell you, there is no, you're not going to arrive at a place where I say, I'm all transformed. It's not going to happen that way. It's more a very gradual progression. And there is no limit to that either for the expansion. That's why I talk about no boundaries and limitless. But you will see the process if one is more aware of their state and realize how they were a year ago and how they are after 1 year. There's definitely a transformation. So this happens while you're going through the transformation. And like I said, I don't think there's an after where you say it's all done now. No, I think it happens till the last day we live on this earth. You can keep transforming, meaning you can keep changing, and the transformation happens at different levels or different ways. So it's not one transformation, but it's just knowing that now your reality is very different from what it used to be. And there's a lot of uncovering truth and not the false reality which we had thought was the case before. So it is a process. But as we go through the process, we need to realize that's why that it is a journey. So we want to enjoy the journey every day, how we become limitless. And you have to push the boundaries more and more and more. Because and also when you go into the road of self-discovery, we also know that when you go inwards through meditation, we get connected to your real self. And that's what we call as it in some ways as intuition, where your core being tells you a lot of stuff, and now you're able to hear that. Before, we didn't even know you had them, so you only listened to the mind, which was saying all different things, because as a whole brain, as a whole field of mind, there are thoughts, all kinds of thoughts. So one thoughts can even contradict the other thoughts. So there is a little more clarity because you can differentiate between the chatter of the mind than the insight. So that is also transformation. So the more clarity you have, that is leading you, or you're transforming slowly. And that will also create more expansion, because now you know that the limits was only caused by your mind to protect you from whatever. That is just a way of the automatic brain protecting you, but it's not really protection. It's more of just the way it is built, inbuilt. Like, for example, we have these little stuff like which we need, like you don't want to put your finger in a fire because it's inbuilt, it'll burn and you lose your finger. So your body tells you like that. So that also happens in your mind, because that's where it's recorded. So if you record something in your mind as not good, then the body is going to try to remember that and will protect you in the future from not doing it. But that may not be really the case. And those are the things you can uncover, how the mind functions. By meditation, you can watch your mind, how it thinks, what kind of thoughts come through, what kind of suggestions it gives. So that is why we have to spend more time in being in the nature, just sitting with yourself calmly, allowing the thoughts to go and face them. And that way you can let go of a lot of thoughts you never knew you had, which didn't make any sense, which was, baseless, or didn't make any sense in whatsoever. So that is how you can bring about a change from inside out. And you can be standing even in the face of whatever happens around you. So that's a process. And it depends on every individual, because it depends on how deep these thoughts have been implanted in your core or your energy body, where it's been there and it's been reinforced again and again. Because before we knew we could do this, we thought about these things again and said it was okay to feel like that, and have it's kind of set in your system. And so obviously everything else which comes is colored and in relationship to that concept or belief system is developed. So belief systems are huge, and many of them are limited. That's another thing, because that is more set in your system rather than fleeting thought about something. And that really is not easy to get rid of. So you have to really go deeper in your meditation to say, this is a belief system which doesn't serve me, which has been developed because of whatever. And sometimes you may not figure out why, but it's not helping me move forward. It's causing obstruction. It's causing a problem in my going forward to what I actually want to do, being more creative, and could be anything. So that is the recognition which comes being aware, which is then the next step could be the transformation, overcoming that or letting go of that. Everybody works on it in different ways. And that creates this expansion, because you're letting go of all these subconscious belief systems. We are human beings. Again, we are energy beings come to the earth for a human experience. So what is a human experience? If you really look at the core of it, it's not all the pleasures which we go through, physical pleasures we're talking about. It's much, much more than that. It is all the everything. For example, your senses, which, eating good food, seeing beautiful things, wearing beautiful clothes, um, hearing beautiful music, feeling the cold breeze on your skin. There's so many of them like that. So those are all gives you certain experiences, and that's part of being human, and that is part of coming to earth. The only problem happens is when we create likes and dislikes about these things and get attached and entangled in it, and that creates different kind of belief systems about different things. And when that happens, we start chasing after the ones we get attached to and resisting everything which is not that. And with that, what happens is you build this limitations against about certain things or certain experiences. And what we want to do is use these emotions and feelings as a catalyst also to go more inwards and find a doorway to experiencing life differently. And that's the real transformation. So the same emotions which you used to be afraid of. So that's what happens, right? If we had gone through some sadness in our, something else happened, somebody was really mean to us, and let's talk about an abusive relationship. If somebody's been in an abusive relationship and that's what they've known, they are so afraid, and and sorry, they've gotten out of the relationship. Now it's going to be a huge problem for this person to get into another relationship, because it's fear now of the same abuse happening again if she or he went into a relationship. But what we are trying to say is, if we look at it as, yes, there is memories, but if we let go of the thoughts which come through, then not give it too much of value and sit with it and meditate, let go, and literally let go of it and transcend it. That's the way you do it. Then you do have these memories, but then your belief system starts changing, as if that, okay, that happened with that person, but not everybody in the world is the same way. So I'm going to give it a try, or I'm going to give this person a chance, so to see what life could be like so differently. Meaning it could be very a loving relationship, really wanting and taking care of each other, and that person taking care of us. So that is the transformation we're talking about, and letting go of the past issues and opening up for new possibilities. Because that is the truth. If you really look at life in general, the fears which we create because of the past circumstances and issues, how many of them are really again and again happening? It is almost, I would say, maybe 2% or 3% of the time, which is kind of rare. So it doesn't happen that way. But again, because of our conditioning and the subconscious programming, we believe that it's going to happen. And that's what keeps us limited. So that is why when you go deeper into meditation, we learn different tools and techniques where you can let go of these blocks, be more expansive and be receptive to, and blending or connecting with the universal field or the universe or the divine, which is so expansive, and saying that I'm just going with the flow. Everything is going to be the way it is. It's just an experience. After all, it's just an emotional or a physical experience. And just leave it at that, and not let it sink in and go through the whole process and develop into a belief system and all of that. So that is the possibility of doing those, taking those steps and going through that personal transformation. Because imagine if you didn't have any limited beliefs, how beautiful it would be. And you were not going to be limited in your mind about anything. No fears at all, no dislikes, no attachments to things which it's not there right now. It's a beautiful thing. It's so much of freedom in there. And that's what it's like, freedom from your mind. That's what we're trying to do, from a limited mind, and transmuting it into limitless mind. The mind being blinded by emotions is the problem. And that is what is one of those things, or which is a problem for us to move forward. So the blinding happens less as we go inwards, meditate more, and understand ourselves with our logical mind, or the positive parts of the mind, and awareness to see how the mind works. Because again, where do the emotions and the feelings come from? The emotions and feelings come from different thoughts which are created in the brain. So we have to be watchful. And if we're more watchful and create tools to be more watchful of our thoughts, then we're going to be able to not really identify with that specific thought, create scenarios and make it even bigger, and where the emotions take a whole new, level of, I would call it even like a monster. So if we have tools which we our more awareness during the day, which reminds us to be watchful and being a witness to our thoughts again and again and again, then we have a chance of not being blinded by thoughts and emotions. I mean, sorry, by emotions and feelings, which is what happens because the subconscious programming is that way, because of all the things which has happened to us, circumstances, situations. Those come with this whole scenario. It's like a movie. So it has been recorded, like, okay, these thoughts come in, but then, for example, let's some incident, suppose it happened with somebody who was really mean to this person, and they would remember the words. So the words created these thoughts in the brain created these emotions, and then it became a feeling over time, and that feeling lingers in your subconscious programming. So that's so clear. This whole movie is running in your subconscious. So every time the brain or the mind brings these thoughts, this whole thing goes in a fraction of a second, and you don't have control over it. And before you know, you're angry, you're frustrated, and the physical response is also created with that. So the idea is to be so watchful of the first thought which comes through, and not giving it, as we call, food for thought, or getting identified with the next thought. Because even if it does, it can only do so much, and then it stops. So what did we do is, by deep breathing, by other tools, you follow all that, and that way, when we don't identify it, that sequence of events don't happen. And so you're kind of literally weakening the programming. Now, you may have to do this several times, many times, before the whole program is destroyed and gone. But that's the beginning. So that is how you can help yourself not to be blinded by these emotions and feelings. Because, yeah, they're an experience. And as you go along, you realize everything is just an experience. We took it seriously, we took it very personally, and we made things in our minds. The perception came, the internal structure or the function of the mind created certain more of these thought processes compared to whatever experiences one has had, and the belief system we've created, and then created with this huge, now the thought is completely blown out of proportion, and that created these emotions. And that emotion became, again, because it came again and again, it became a feeling which is long lasting. And this whole sequence is now in the mind movie, and then in this subconscious mind movie. So that is now a programming. So every time you see this person, you're only thinking about this. This whole movie keeps playing in again and again. And that's the destructive mode. So this is the limitations of the mind we've created. So we have to undo it and weaken the programming as we go along. And that is very effective. That's why with meditation and letting go and things like that. Programmings are not always destructive. The programmings, there are certain programmings which are constructive, because that is why we are able to do beautiful things. For example, if we were in a meeting, or if we had come across somebody had said something good, we remember that. And even that is played as a movie. You went for this conference, this person said this, and that is remembered as a thing. And then, you have a patient. I'm talking from physician's perspective. You can connect it with a patient who's having the same issue, and you tried this in that patient, and that patient got better. So that's a constructive programming. That's a constructive movie, which is in your system. So obviously, we'd want to get rid of the subconscious program, which is not favorable to us or the other people. And that is what we have to weaken and get rid of them. So all of the programming is not destructive, definitely not. The journey of personal transformation is all dependent on constructive programming, the new programming, definitely. So we are using a conscious mind and visualization techniques where you dissociate your current issues with that previous programming, or can disconnect with your current identified personality of certain things, and go into this neutral field where you can actually do the new programming. And it has to be done again and again. It's like a habit. If you want to create a new habit, you have to do it over and over and over again before that becomes a habit. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen even in weeks, but it does happen in months and years. So definitely the new programming has to be deliberately done with consistency, making sure that every time these obstacles come in, you're going to use certain affirmations. You're going to make sure that it is not taking over. You're watching it. You're not giving it you're not giving it food, or you're not giving it, identifying with, pursuing it. You have to be watchful of that. So yes, there's a lot of these things you can do. You have to do a new programming, and that is what we want to do. There's different ways of doing it. There's multiple tools available out there. There's something called psych kinesiology, which is amazing. There's tapping. There is different kinds of energy techniques. That's tapping is one of them. And those are all definitely useful tools to get rid of the old programming and actually create new programming, releasing all the obstacles, the subconscious issues. It's like, for example, if you have a huge coffee table with 1,000 legs, we don't have to take out every leg, because there are certain big issues which are holding this table. And so we are trying to get rid of some of the programming, and the whole table topples over, and there's nothing left anymore. So it kind of dissolves there. So a lot of times, even it's just enough to look at your programming. I mean, I'm not talking about intense programming. Some of these thoughts and issues which are mild, it's not that intense. You just have to recognize it's there, but not again get into it and release it. So that is different techniques to do to get rid of the old programming and then incorporate the new, which you do, because now you have more mind space, more space in your subconscious and conscious. It doesn't have to be any automatically downloaded like it did before. You're more conscious and aware of the thoughts coming through, even, and that is what we want to create. That is self-mastery. That is what's going to lead to personal transformation, or the personal transformation can lead to self-mastery. It's one or the other. It could be both ways. So yes, definitely we have to do that new programming. I want to talk a little bit about the third part of the mission statement or the vision of Angel Wing. The first two were self-mastery and personal transformation. And the vision is that a human being goes through this whole process of evolution where they start with discovery or even questioning of who am I, which leads to the self-discovery and therefore self-mastery. And when you reach self-mastery, and whatever it may be like for each individual, there is definitely a transformation. And the transformation is how one can transcend the mind-body complex and know that there is something more than that. And that is the real self. And that in itself is a transformation. So if each and every one of us as a human being goes through this process, then the society at large is going to look very different. So that is why I call it at human upliftment. The reason it's called upliftment is if you look at the world around us, and that is a reflection of all of us. It is not just one person. Because of not knowing who we are and how connected we are to each other and how similar we are or how one we are with as a unit, as a humanity, we differentiate between each other, we compete with each other, we are in conflict with each other, not just individuals, but nations, societies, communities, everything. So we see a lot of conflict, a lot of wars, a lot of just more like not a collaboration or a togetherness. We don't see that at all if we look at the society in general. We feel for each other and everything, but we still differentiate ourselves as belonging to a community, belonging to a group, belonging to a country, and so forth. So I think one needs to really go deep and look into ourselves and go through this whole process. So the world will definitely look like a different world, where there are going to be more of a utopian kind of a society where everybody has a place and a purpose in this earth, on this planet, and each of our purpose is important. And how can we make it a wonderful and a wise society and create a whole different world with the planet in the picture? Like, we cannot eliminate the universe or the planetary other living beings and other non-living beings, whatever we find on Earth. So if we live with knowing how we are a part of this universe or a part of the planet, and live in synchronicity with the universe, then it is going to be a whole different society or world where it is just not completely afflicted by all these chaos and conflict, and therefore diseases and etc. So that is my vision of human upliftment. What I have seen through my life journey so far, the only way to uplift your community around you, your family, even to start small, is to look inside ourselves, because each of us are so unique and so self-involved, meaning that we are so identified with our minds and the concept created by our mind, that it is becoming harder and harder for us to even know there is something beyond the mind. So this becomes a problem, because the mind fluctuates, the mind changes with circumstances on the outside, memories from inside, belief systems, and so forth. So it's never constant. And that is the problem with it. So when we identify with our mind and think this is all there is, and when you identify the mind, I always include the body in it, because the mind affects the body essentially. So, and we talked about it before. So essentially that is the basic thing. Then when we don't realize that there is something beyond our mind and the body, it may be difficult to transcend it. That is a whole different topic. But even knowing that there is something more gives us that desire or yearning to get to that state, which is more constant and peaceful and calm and love and compassion, or however you call it, and doesn't get affected or helps us not to identify with our mind so much. So the solution is in each of us. We cannot, and what do we mean by society is whatever we put out there is it's a reflection of our thoughts. It's a reflection of where our state of mind is. So if each of us put thoughts into the field, it is going to be conflicting, because that is a lot of thoughts and a lot of different changing, I would say, opinions. And the same opinion, if that person had, may itself change the next moment. So there is a lot of, it's transient. It's not constant. So that is why we cannot identify with our mind to say this is who we are. And the more and more we learn to stay in that constancy of the real self, we realize that is a state which each of us have. And if each of us learned to go back to that state, even when our minds are chaotic, and the mind learns to quieten after a while, and then we can really see the connectedness in each and every one of us with each other, which is going to be more constant. And that gives us clarity and helps us create a lot more of things without the negativity and the differentiation and comparison and all the conflicts and everything. Because if you really see, all our lives are gone in that, from the time you're born till you die, we only have conflicts, and we live in the basic needs and we just stay there. We're not going beyond that. So we don't even know what else we're capable of. But if we really had that idea about, not idea, if you are connected to that state of the real self, then it would make it a different world, because it's even hard to conceive it, because we don't know what it would be like. All I can say is that a lot more creativity comes from even a little bit of things, whatever percentage that is in the world you see. People have been focused on inventions. People have inventions in any industry, automobile industry, making rockets, going to other planets, very, very inquisitive about how things work. All of them have created such beautiful things. So if there was more people involved in using this energy or using this mind for constructive things, then it would be a whole different, universe, or whole different humanity. So that is what I would like to see, which includes all of us. When you can imagine, if you put positive vibes in the field is going to be so powerful that it can create a whole different world, or change the whole different world or the universe. And that is how powerful we are. So we just don't know that we just think this is all there is. Human suffering is on many, many different levels. Of course, it still starts with the mind, in my opinion, because again, what is suffering is how much you identify negatively with that event or the memory, or even getting too attached to something and losing it and thinking that is all there is. There are so many aspects to it. And then, of course, not to mention physical health being really bad and afflicted with diseases, all of that. So there is multiple causes for that, the suffering, in the sense it starts with the mind still, because even if we think about suffering could be from human immunity going down, like we see in the pandemic, like the COVID-19, how did it just sweep the whole planet and killed that many people, thousands and thousands of people? It's because of one thing would be that our immune system is weak. And what made the immune system weak on several levels? And it still starts with the human mind, because if we think about all the contamination, or eating different foods which are not good for us, so-called foods, all the toxins which we ingest, where did it come from? Maybe it started on okay with good intentions, but somewhere along the line, it became for greed, for profit, people willing to do anything to mass produce and just give it to the public, not caring about whether it's affecting them or they could affect the mass population adversely, etc. So that also started in the mind. So, human mind in the beginning, which made it, we all talk about these Monsanto, which is like a huge company in the West Coast, which started all these gluten and toxins and Roundup and pesticides and fertilizers and all of that. Well, it wasn't always started with that intention, but then it became because of just wanting to mass produce and killing those bugs which are affecting the crops and all of that. But again, it still started in the mind, because any idea is always conceived in the mind. So I think that is why the root cause in my journey is usually basically the mind. They may not have intended it to be so bad, and so big, but the greed or the money became so important at some point that it went beyond it. Even things like, for example, manufacturing drugs, or coming into these big stashes of cocaine, heroin, all other drugs. It's going to kill people, but the ultimate goal is because you can make money off of these things. and people are willing to kill each other to do that. So where did that come from? So the suffering is caused by the human mind and against each other. And this is why we have to come back to the same thing. If we really knew and started going back to the fact that what is money bringing you? Again, if it's pleasure, whatever that is, whether it's food, whether it is living in big palatial houses, owning big airplanes, jets, jewelry, etc., knowing that these are all transient and you could lose it at any point, and go beyond that and go into the self where that peace or that joy is constant, and reaching that place is important. So when you do that, these things vanish. These things have not much value. There's no conflict in one person's own mind between parts of the mind. So that in itself is going to be a big thing when you see that smoke or the cloud or the dark cloud move away and your real true self, who you are, and you don't need that anymore. And that gets you away from suffering. Because all this is, we are afflicting each other with these diseases and physical issues and all of that. Nowadays, the biggest problem is depression, anxiety, bipolar, etc., whatever that is. The point in this is all these things are really, really have to be thought of it one by one, and people need time for that. That is why you have to have or spend certain time reflecting on all this. And this is absolutely worth everything, because you are less inflicted by anxiety, less with sadness, less with depression, everything. We all think we need much more than we actually need. So really need the basics: a roof over your head, your basic food. And in fact, as you get older, as you get richer, and because you've abused your life and your physical health, you cannot eat half the things anyway. So you go back to the basics then. So the basic food which we need, your body needs, is very minimal. So clothes, roof over your head, and food. This is all there is. But everything else is from the mind. Oh, but I need this. But I need better food. I need the delicacy. I need this better clothes because I look good for somebody else, not even me. Maybe me, but not even me. And the others don't even think that you look so good, and that changes also. So this is all the conflicts people go through in their mind, causing them to suffer beyond what they can. Even the richest people, have killed themselves and just not been in this world. A lot of these rock stars, people would kill to be them in many different ways. But you know what happened. So what happened in them? It's their mind which got the better of them. So I think one needs to really, really go into that, introspect, and apply it in practice. And that is why one needs time. And I'm not talking about hours and hours. We're talking about even getting back to that state periodically, during the day, which helps us realize our real self. That in itself is going to transform one's life. And if each of us did that, it would be a different humanity or human population. And that is human upliftment. The picture I have of an ideal human society would be a community still like living like what we're living, but caring for each other. Even the stuff one has, you don't need to have individual stuff. You could share things. You could have, like, for one community, you could have the main things which we all use and borrow from each other, help each other out. And so that everybody has equal distribution, and everybody has, and in fact, it should start, or it could start from childhood education, where kids are taught, and kids would definitely be easily influenced by that, sharing everything and having everything, helping each other out. And more than that, every child, when they grow up, has a talent, and what they're drawn towards. So if you could nurture that instead of forcing the children to go through the current form of education where they have to go through math and science, and everybody's not oriented like that. So if we could encourage each child and figure out the passion in them and cultivate that and enhance, so they get enhanced by following that, because when that an individual, when they're passionate about it, the best comes out of it in the same career, in that same path. So everybody has that innate drive. The problem is they're not encouraged to do that because of not being able to make a living and whatnot. So if we could do that, it would be a great society, because there would be people in all parts, all areas, who would work together in different areas, helping each other out. So there is a common pool where everybody's taken care of. And if everybody's taken care of, there is no need for somebody to have that upmanship over the other. So I think that would be a good, society to live in, when it's all collaborative, working towards a greater cause, working more towards because when that multiple people, when you do it in a group or a population or multiples, it's always much better, because you have more creative ideas, you have better insights on things, and different aspects of different aspects of a solution to a problem. It could be much more than having that one person be up there. So I think this is all also created by human beings over hundreds of years, where they have said that, okay, this person who has this much money is much better, even as an individual. Or if this person is this much qualified, is much better than this individual. So the belief systems have set in generation after generation. So it is ultimately even important for us to dismantle that belief system, or deconstruct all these belief systems which we have cultivated or created. And that needs to happen. And when that happens only, we can see a different world, because it is deep rooted. It is not as simple. That is why, like, some people believe it. Like, we look at discrimination, where does that come from? That from childhood, if they're around people, the parents and siblings and uncles and aunts and everything, who's always talking about another group of people, that's going to be set in them, saying this is the way it should be. And even my country, my soldier, my army. Why my army? All human beings are the same. Why should I be so patriotic about my country and hate other countries? And we go in war, and we are okay killing other people. They're individuals like us. But then it's drilled into our head that we have to protect our country, and it's okay to do in the name of protecting your country by killing X, Y, and Z. And that in itself has created monsters or terrorists outside of us, because then it's like eye for an eye, and then never stops. It just only gets bigger and bigger. So I think it has to come from the root. That's why and it cannot be changed by talk. It cannot be changed by lectures, because again, these people will gravitate towards lectures which their belief systems go with. They're not going to go somewhere where it's open. So I think if one can even be aware that there is something beyond your mind, then that awareness itself will take you on this path to figure out who you are, the self-discovery and self-mastery. When the real self emerges, even blips of it, or even like some flashes of it, it'll just take over, and you know that there is something beyond. Then start questioning your belief systems and say, this doesn't make sense. So I think that's why you have to work on, each individual has to work on themselves to really find the truth for themselves, because that has to be so deep and resonate so much for them that they will have that conviction that this is what works for me, or this is who I align with, I won't call you values and principles. I would call much more than that. I don't know what the term for that is, but so that's what I would like. That's the world I would envision. How do you explain the current human nature, which is being instilled in people about self-preservation and survival of the fittest, the theory of, you have to be egoistic to protect yourself, to look out for yourself, and all of that. Yeah, so my reflection on that, or opinion on that, is, and not opinion actually, I believe, and I've lived it, and I think that because of my own transformation, I can say this, is I was raised in a family where not everybody was generous. We were, in fact, I was raised, I'm a single child raised in a family, and the reason they my parents were like that is because they believed from their parents. Again, like I said before, it is instilled from generation to generation, so it is deep rooted. But, and my family, this has been instilled in me that I had to look out for myself, and everything we should be keeping it to ourselves, and as much as possible, because tomorrow might come when I may have a day when I don't have enough, and nobody will come to my rescue. Nobody is going to help me. Nobody's going to do anything like that. And so it was very conservative, very, very what's narrow perspective, not expansive at all. The what happened because of that is, as I was growing up, I didn't know much. I was okay till I literally went into medical school, and even after that. So the fact of the matter is, despite, I can go back and look at my life when I believed it and I lived the life like that. So, and being very selfish and self-involved and all of that. But that did not really give me that freedom inside of it. Something was nagging. Something was not, it wasn't enough, because it never subsided. And initially, of course, we didn't have much money. We earned and we made money, and of course, in due course, we had much more than what we ever had before. But what we realized was, the more you make and the more you earned, the more you became miserly, more you wanted to keep, and the more you didn't want to share, because lest you would lose it all, and then what? And you were afraid of losing everything, and that would be the end of it, because that was the belief system created. As my life progressed, and of course there was a lot of influence, my husband was very large-hearted, his whole family, actually his mother was like that, learned some openness, and learned to be more authentic, meaning I was who I was, or I am who I am. And I wasn't raised like that. In fact, I was not supposed to really reveal my own inner, I won't say secrets, but just my opinions, how I felt about things. I had to behave a certain way. I had to conceal things, because that was taught the right way. Nobody's fault. That was just the way it was. And as I started becoming more authentic and found my spiritual path, and then science behind it, more into the quantum theory and quantum field and quantum universe, realized that there is much, much more than how I used to think and how much identification I had given to my mind. So one by one, and I have done this, and I can tell you from a lot of conviction, that released a lot of these negative belief system I had acquired. And as I did that, and I went into some amount of self-discovery and mastery, I realized that I am not alone at all. And I have to be who I am. And I'm more connected than I ever thought with any individual around me. And when I started doing that, I really became fearless and more free. And I really started losing the grip on the old belief systems about this this is how human beings need to be, self-preservation. No, that is not who we are. In fact, it's complete opposite. We are all one being or one unit. The more you connect with the next person, you realize how connected we are. We are individuals for sake of differentiation to live in this world. But as far as everything else goes, we are so connected, we don't even know that. And that is how now I live my life with really no fear. I don't have to hold on to everything that I did before, small to big. And yes, we need some amount of money and everything because you want for yourself, your family, and if you have a business or a practice or anything like I do or we do, we have to take care of the employees and have certain things and all of that. But beyond that, there is no need to keep holding on to things more and more. And what I mean by we are one unit is, if you really look at how we came into this world or created, you could say, we are all energy beings, came into these bodies, into this world. So what happens when we die and once the body is of no use? It just, you can burn the body, but the energy cannot go away. That is science. It only gets transformed, right? So if we are energy beings come into this form, where does energy go? It just doesn't disappear. So it's all a mass of one energy. Energy is all connected. So each of us have this bundle of energy. You can call it a soul, you can call it spirit, whatever you call it, is all, if we connect to that part of an individual, of another individual, then we realize that we are all the same. Even if babies, think about babies, all the babies are alike. Just they look different, but they are the same kind of spirit or the energy beings. They may have certain personalities and then they may grow to have different personality. All this is good. But essentially, the bundle of energy is the same. So, but we are, as we grow up, because of circumstances, what parents have told us, every identity we have acquired is only from outside. None of us have been taught, and it's nobody to blame. It's just because nobody knew either, to have taught to go inwards and say, where is the spirit which we came into being? And what is that spirit? And so the more we investigate on it, we just realize it's the same spirit in each and every one of us. And if you go to the core of everyone, every human being is love. Everybody understands love. It may be different forms of love and with relationships, but love is love. It is that kind of a wonderful emotion, feeling state. I would call it a state which everybody understands. Compassion, everybody understands. Happiness, everybody understands. Joy, everyone understands. How can that be the same? So where is all this coming from? It's not the fleeting emotions from the head, from the mind. There is some commonality with all of us. And that is the essence we're talking about. When we talk about this essence being one in each and every one of us, we definitely realize that there is a bigger connection than with each of us than we think in the mind that we are. So that connection we have to strengthen as we go more and more. So when you strengthen that connection and not identify with the mind concepts which has been built over time because of the circumstances and how we perceive things, what images we've formed in our head, connected it to our belief systems, which is so strong, and we acquired, everything falls off. Even the belief system is acquired is something which has been built over time or from others. It is not our own. The belief systems are not real at all, in fact. And every belief system we have, you can stick to that because and that's the problem, because our identity is based on all of this. And that is where we are in trouble when you believe it. That's why we have so many people with political differences, religious differences, spiritual differences, whatever you call it, education differences, qualification differences. I mean, even personality differences. You can just go on and on, because we think this is who we are, and we go and form groups of it. And then what happens when we have something else happen in our event and we change, we leave that group. How can that be if that is who we identify with? And sometimes you stay there because you don't want to move out of it, lest you don't have a group to belong to. And then you're lost because you think you cannot survive by yourself. But the truth of the matter is we did come alone into this in this world, completely alone. There's nobody who came together. Even the twins who came together are in individual bodies, created uniquely differently. How many twins do we know of stories where the twins are completely different personalities and completely different thought process and everything? So it is not even as simple as that. So that's the uniqueness in each one of us, and not just the uniqueness. The beauty of us is, even though there is uniqueness, but there is a connection of a unity also between us. So that is just the beauty of it. If we can recognize that, then that would in itself lead to human upliftment and a different society. Definitely, we are one mass of energy. There is no doubt about that. And we're like a big mass of electrons. I mean, or, whatever you call it, like a big mass where you're parts of or molecules in it. And if that's why it doesn't make sense, if the molecules fight with each other, where they're going to go, they're fighting with themselves in this huge mass. That in itself doesn't make sense. But when you unify, when you do things together as a mass, then a whole new something beautiful comes out of it. I would say from my experience, because I feel connected definitely much more than I did before, because through my journey, and there is no doubt about that. I try my best as I meet more and more individuals to connect at the heart level or the core level or the spirit level. And that makes it much easier for me to not focus on their negativities or faults, because who doesn't have? The biggest example is your children and your siblings, your parents. You still put up with these people despite all the negativities they have. Some of us can go through, some relatives we have who are very difficult. Like they may have 1,000 different negativities, but they have only 2 different good qualities. But it doesn't matter. It's because that is who they have identified themselves with, but that is not the real being. It still is the same core, spirit, which he or she who came from wherever into this planet or earth to live this human life or to experience this human life. How one does it is up to them. But if we connect at a deeper level, saying that this is the same spirit that I was born with, and this is the same spirit that person was born with, that connectedness just gives us a whole different perspective and of looking at them and taking the best in them. And that way we can bring out the best in them also. Any individual, if you look at it in our lives, if we do not focus on their negativities or the faults, so-called faults, from our perspective, you can always bring out the best in them. That means you can help them even look at their positivities and connect themselves to the real self. So that is the other advantage of each one of us when we attain self-mastery, is we know we did it. So we can help others by helping them release their negativities and finally get to that point of saying that I am pure, I am the best. And this is what happens when people get rehabilitated, even the major sinners like murderers or rapists or, all these prisoners who can get rehabbed, whether it's by looking inside the real self and the spirit. You can call it God. You can call the faith in God, connected and being anchored in that being called God or the concept of God. It doesn't matter, because the concept of God is also something much more than our negativities. So that helps us also to help elevate or uplift the other humans beings to look at it the same, no matter what they have done in their lives. So that is the essence of rehabilitating people, and not the other way around, where once they have committed a sin, they will never be forgiven for that and be reminded of it forever. And that's why a lot of prisoners go back to jail. A lot of drug addicts become drug addicts again, because nobody helps. Not nobody, a lot, most of the society do not want to accept them and help them look at their real self, and always look out for themselves and saying, oh, that would be, again, being self-involved, and self-involved in that identification with that mind, etc. What is a belief system, and how is it connected to human upliftment? It's a big thing, actually. Think about ourselves. What are all the beliefs we have created in our lives? And this can come from our environment. It could be religious beliefs, it could be political beliefs, it could be strong opinions because of all the things you have looked into. You have compared it with history, certain other innate qualities you have. So you connect all these things and come up with certain strong opinions, which is set in your system as belief systems. It's very difficult to change them unless one wants to really be so inquisitive and has this yearning to go deeper and really, again, really go deeper to find the self. Now, all these belief system also at the level of the mind, because you've heard things through your senses, you have certain perceptions or perspectives, and that, in connection to your past and your circumstances and what you've been told by your family, your parents, and everything, and what you've read in school and what you've been taught, everything gets connected, and then you form your own belief system. So that for you seems logical because we're all at the level of the mind. And till somebody or something in your life challenges it, and that could be something which breaks that belief system. And even then, it may not. But that is the core of how the belief system also occurs or has been set in you or in us through our journey through life. And this is at the level of the mind, because we're always thinking, and we're using an analytical mind for everything. And there's only so much the mind can grasp and make some kind of a thing out of it. So, and that also changes. So while the core is there, but still, if something really shakes that belief system, then people feel like completely out of commission. Like they feel like they don't have an anchor, because everybody needs something to ground themselves in this world. And so they have developed these belief systems which allow them to do. Now, right or wrong is a whole different matter. And there is no one right or wrong anyway. So this is why the mind identification is the heavily identified mind can lead to that, even to the extent that it is very harmful to other human beings. And these belief systems, that's what happens, who are fanatics about everything, whether it is food, whether it is exercise, whether it is religion, whether it is politics, whether it is health, it can be anything. And if you're strong about it, and even if it's not been helping you in any other way, but you just have these strong emotions about it, strong feelings about it, you're going to just stay that way. And this is the problem when you feel that your belief system is the best or the correct and nobody else's is. And that's the conflict. Remember, everything is at the level of the mind. So the more things are at the level of the mind, it's a problem because there can be so many conflicts. That's why. But when you go to the spirit level, when you go to that base, there is no change. There is only one energy. There's only one spirit. There's only one soul, whatever you can call it. And that is unshaken and constant. And there's no two ways about it. So that is why we want to connect with that state, which allows us to watch our minds the way it works. And if we can do more and more, then we actually may laugh at ourselves for all the belief system we've acquired. All belief systems a hindrance, or are there some which are healthy? Some of them are healthy. If it's, in my opinion, in my journey, any belief system which is helping more than ourselves, serving the larger good, that means other human beings, other living things on this planet, the planet itself, then it's more than a belief system. And that is definitely something which is positive. But anything which is for a small group or individual or self involved is negative, because that is really harming not only them, but the rest of the population. So that is where the problem comes. One set of people are good, one set of people are not good. Those are issues. But if you say, otherwise, then you have to really think about it. The gist of it is there is a lot of diversity, but the diversity is at the level of where you come from, which part of the world you live in, what you look like. It's all in matter, flesh and bones, and how you've been raised, and cultures and traditions and rituals and all of that. And that is very rich. We can learn to appreciate all of that. And because even those are rooted in, if you really look at it, most of the traditions and rituals and everything is rooted in oneness. It is not in to separate things and everything like that. But we are all really rooted in that one spirit. Even if you look at our bodies, physical aspects of it. Outside, we may look different, meaning the color and woman, man, and everything. But really, if you look at even parts of our body inside, even outside, we have exactly the same. The internal systems are same, the nervous system, the brain, the respiratory system, the cardiac and endocrine, everything is the same. Even outside the senses, your eyes, your ears, your nose, your face, it may have different characteristics to see, to look at. All of us have this similarity. It's uncanny if you really think deeper, even in our logical brains, even in intellectually. How can that happen if the core unit or the spirit is not the same, that all this diversity is not rooted in that one spirit? So even in those terms, we could appreciate the fact that we are so diverse and contribute in different ways, which can resonate with different people, but come back to the same root. And this is what all the spirituality in all traditions, in all religions, they all come back to the same point about our oneness, how we are created in that oneness, or how we are connected with each other, and how we're one humanity. There is no doubt about that. Even with the wisdom, even that's been given, if you really question that, it always comes back to that. But we're not wanting to see it because we identify with our mind, our greed, our pleasure. Everything takes us in different directions, and you're so conflicted. And that leads to a big problem. And sometimes it takes you away to a place where you no longer even are aware of it. And becomes harmful to the other person or the rest of the people. So that is why it comes back. Yes, it comes back to the same root of knowing yourself, knowing who we are, this true self, and the self-discovery leading to self-mastery. The more we are in control of our mind and going into that state of the real self, we really realize the futility for all of this. And that would really look at every individual as part of you, as a part of us. And so when we start looking at them like that, then why would you hurt that person? That means you're hurting yourself. You're kicking yourself. You're in whatever way. We wouldn't want to do that. And there's no point in that. So I think that is why we need to come back to that point of self-mastery leading to human upliftment.